Hello, I am here with Rob, and he has agreed to come in and talk to us about sobriety and sobering up in Seattle and what his experience is. Hi, Rob.
Hi, Laura. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
It is great to be here. I'm well. Um, yeah, it's awesome. As you know, I work right next door, so this is perfect.
I know it's great. You stop into the office, I don't know, a couple times a week, and it's great to see you.
It is. It is. It's a nice little respite in the middle of the day. If I need to get away from the hustle and bustle of work, I can come down here, talk to some alcoholics,
Hmm.
feel better, and go back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talking to alcoholics can be real grounding.
Yes, yes, it can be. That's one of the things it can be. Yes, grounding,
Right.
definitely.
I get calls in here sometimes, and it's like, okay, now I know. I remember why I'm here.
This is why I'm here.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
This is what keeps me grateful.
yeah.
So, well, thanks again for coming in. And I don't know, you just have such a great energy about you. And I just really wanted to hear your story and learn more about you. And so let's start with the beginning. Have you always lived in Seattle?
Right? Yeah. I am what would be called. I think I am a true Seattleite. Born and raised. Grew up on Finney Ridge. Back when Finney Ridge was middle lower class.
Mhm.
It's not like that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Youngest of four. Um, yeah, loving mother and father who are still married and been married for 60 plus years. It's crazy.
That's great.
Literally, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Youngest of four. I'm the only alcoholic in the family. Um, but a little interesting side note: my my mom's dad, who I never met because he died before I was born, he was an alcoholic, and he his name was Robert, and I'm Robert. So it's kind of weird.
That is a little weird.
Yeah, yeah. But like I said, yeah, that's so. I mean, yeah, I had a great upbringing. Like I say, loving parents, um, stable family, um, yeah, all these things.
Yeah, I just thought of something really quick.
Yeah.
My dad was one of four, the only alcoholic, and his name's Robert.
See,
What is
there's.
that? I don't know. Is there something with
Crazy.
that?
If you have a fourth kid,
Yeah,
don't name him Robert.
do not.
He will be an alcoholic.
That's
That is funny. But yeah, I say that because I don't have to qualify myself, but it's like I always say that like what was my reason? Why was I an alcoholic? I mean, and obviously I think people were born that way. Um, but early on though, I didn't. It wasn't one of those things where I started drinking and drugging at 13 because of what my first drink of alcohol, and I think this is kind of cool. It was my grandmother, so my mom's mom. So grandmother was awesome, and she was the one that was married to Robert, and they divorced. Well, I wonder why.
Mm-hmm.
He was an alcoholic, but I had a glass of champagne out of it was a glass champagne flute or whatever. Oh, it was great. And she's like, I remember her saying, you let it trickle down the back of your throat. I was probably 13 or 14. It was a summer wedding, family wedding. But it wasn't one of those things where I'm like, oh, and I knew I had arrived kind of thing. It was just like, oh, grandmother said, I drank it and I had a sip. Weird, bubbly taste. But I didn't have like a craving for more. You hear that sometimes in the rooms, like
Sure.
I had my first and I was off and running. Well, that wasn't my experience. So I think just as it says in the book too, you don't necessarily start drinking alcoholically at first, but there sure came a point later on in my life that I couldn't stop. So yeah, so I am a true alcoholic. I mean,
Yeah.
I know I'm qualified in that case,
Yeah.
in that sense. Yeah.
All right. So when did you start drinking regularly?
So I mean, literally, I went to school. I always played sports. I was a mediocre student, but I hung out with a good group of kids, and they were all smart. But I went to a smaller private school, and it was a good community there. Like I knew all my friends' parents, and it was safe. And I didn't hang out with people that drank. It just wasn't kind of thing. We didn't have time. We were either studying or playing sports. I don't know. It was weird. So I had my first drink like with my cousin. He went to a school here like a liberal school in Seattle, Seattle Academy of Arts and Sciences.
Yeah, yeah.
And so my first drinking party I went to with him, it was like the parents were drinking upstairs, the kids were drinking downstairs kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then we went over to a house party near Garfield. drank some there, and I, stole a pack of. There was like menthol smokes in the fridge or in the freezer, But I had a few drinks, and then went home, and I had and then the next day I had football practice, and I was so sick the next day. But it wasn't, yeah. And I didn't drink a lot though. I had stuff to do, and then I gradually started drinking more. I went to University of Washington. I was in a fraternity, but I also didn't want to fall into the whole like cliche. I don't want to be the frat guy that drinks. Yeah. So, but would drink away from the fraternity, drink off campus, and then eventually well, I'm not going to do that. Just kind of started to chip away, and then drank more. And then after college, drank more with the buddies that I hung out with, and it just gradually more and more, all that stuff I had in my mind. Well, I'm not that bad. It's not like I'm not going to do that. I would eventually do that, and just kind of progressed. Yeah. So I think my drinking probably got really bad like in my mid-20s, late 20s, and that's when I started moving on in corporate life, getting jobs, getting a fiance, getting married. It was all one big whirlwind,
So what was that bottom for you then?
Okay, so then I probably blew through a couple bottoms. Cheating on my fiance, getting caught a few months before the wedding, almost having it called off, might be a wake up call for somebody. I mean, I would, kind of thing. I just justified it. Well, I did that because of this, and we got married, but that wasn't a strong foundation. Started, that one eroded. We got divorced, and then right when I got divorced, this is back in late 2003 or 2004, got divorced, got laid off again from my corporate job, got a severance package, bought a bar
with good thinking.
it was my good friend, and he was my business partner. We bought his partner out of a bar, met the mother of my child. This is all in the course of all this stuff. I mean, it was all these things. It's like just these red flags that I'd be like, I'm just going to blow through it. Everything will be fine. And then in that bar life, that's where I'm in the bar. And then I met cocaine, in that, doing it, and then that's when it kind of took off. That's when it stopped being just, but so my bottom was in the early 2000s, 2004 to 5, 6, 7. And then I got sober. My sobriety date is January 1st, 2008. So 2007 was a rough year. January 1st.
Wow.
Yeah. So interesting too. So late 2007, I'm kicked out of the house. I have a 9-month-old. My son was born in February of 2007. And I was never married to his mom. We were living together. And it was a whirlwind. The whole literally, she and I partied together for years. I think I met her in 2004, and we partied up until the summer of 2007. Then she found out she was pregnant. Summer 2006, she found out she was pregnant. And then I was like, well, I'm not pregnant, so I can keep partying. And then, but there was just terrible. She had Braxton Hicks contraction one night. I was at my drug dealer's house at 3 and 4 in the morning. She had to come get me. And then we went to the hospital because she had Braxton Hicks contractions, that kind of stuff. Just disappointment after disappointment. And then when we had him in 2007, then I was like, okay, I'll clean it up a bit, But then I was like, well, I'm not breastfeeding. And then by the summer 2007, I picked right back up and just justified everything that I did. And then I got kicked out of the house in November 2007, couch surfing, selling coke, running a bar. Everything was crumbling around me. And then that's when she said, either you get sober or you never see us again. But I think for her, sober meant stop doing cocaine and Xanax that's not prescribed to you.
Right.
Everyone I hung out with drank. I mean, she was a liquor rep. We had a garage full of wine and but it was like, you got to stop doing cocaine. So, but I will always be grateful for her. She forced me into rehab. And that's when so my first drink and drug, my last drink and drug was December 26th of 2007.
Mm-hmm.
And then on New Year's Eve, I was at my parents' house. I knew I was going into rehab on the 3rd of January. I knew that. I was away from my son. I was away from her. I'm like, I got to get some sleep. And I had some Xanax. I took a handful of Xanax. And so that my sobriety date's January 1st.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. So, my gosh, I just think about that insanity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That sounds crazy.
Yeah.
So did you go to Inpatient?
So I went to Inpatient. It was Highland Court up in Port Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's even around anymore.
Mm-hmm.
But it was either that or Sundown. I had no idea about. I didn't know. I think Sundown had been better amenities and better whatever. But I got what I needed from Highland Court. I mean, it was literally bare bones. There was no pop there. There was no. It was the boys were on one end, the girls on the other end. It was very like, and I just sat there in these group sessions, and then we would do nightly AA meetings or NA meetings, which were my first ever in my life. I didn't know. So
would people come from the outside
Yep.
and bring meetings?
People would come from the outside of Port Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
They'd come in and come. But that was my first experience with the format of a meeting. I didn't know anything about it.
Huh?
Never before.
Only on the movies
Never
or something?
before. Well, my mom had a friend, Larry. He was prominent. We went to church with him, but he was prominent with the AA at Ballard.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was in high school, I just knew he was in AA,
Mm-hmm.
but Larry was an ex-con. So I always thought AA was for convicts, ex-cons,
Mm-hmm.
old dudes, people that smoked.
Right.
It didn't resonate with me. I never thought I had a problem.
Yeah.
He never, so that was my experience with it.
Mm.
Yeah. So but I'm glad. So Highland Court said, when you get out of here, you're going to go to AA, you're going to get a home group, you're going to get a sponsor, you're going to work the steps.
Nice.
And I think I was so beaten down. I was like, okay, yeah, that sounds like a plan.
Yeah. So off you started. Came back home to where were you living at the time?
Up top of Queen Anne.
Okay.
So I come home to, the mother of my child who's pissed at me.
Yeah.
I come home to a business partner. I mean, the 2008 started hitting some weird times with the economy, but also my business partner in the bar. And by that time we had a bar, a couple of restaurants. Yeah. He wasn't talking to me.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what. I was so just struck, like, what's going on?
Mm-hmm.
But I first day back in Seattle, I go to Agape at noon down in Ballard, or at St. Paul's.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm
with Rita?
I'm walking right now. Rita,
Mm-hmm.
R.I.P. Rita. She's awesome. Every time she rubbed me the wrong way, she would do something so cool, and I would be like, she was awesome.
Mm-hmm.
She was great.
Yeah.
She just ran around that meeting. But like, I was going in there because I think I was looking St. Paul's. I was looking for an NA meeting. Now, granted, I am an alcoholic. I took the assessment in treatment, and they're like, dude, you're a late stage alcoholic. And I think I fudged the numbers a little low, probably.
Mm-hmm. Sure.
But I was thinking, in my mind, I was thinking, it's got, NA and cocaine, blah, blah, blah. So I was going for an NA meeting. I'm walking into that meeting at St. Paul's, and a guy's walking out. This guy that I had known from playing poker in the back rooms of bars in Seattle, these cash games late at night that I had no business being at, that I would be there effing off, just, And this guy was crazy, but I remember he only drank Red Bulls. He and I hit it off because he was a business guy. He was a crazy business guy, but he liked me. I liked him, but I was walking in, he's walking out. He's like, dude, what are you doing here? I'm like, oh, I just got out of treatment. I'm looking for an NA meeting. And he laughed and he said, this is no offense to any NA stuff, but he said, fuck NA. If you want to get sober, go to AA. And here's some meetings to go to. And then I ended up kind of tagging along with him in my early sobriety. The guy saved my life.
Yeah.
He's not sober now.
Oh.
He smokes weed. He's on his own path. But I will be forever grateful for people like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he was my intro to AA. And he was the one that said, everything's going to be all right. And I'd be like, no, I need to get this. I need to do that. He'd laugh. And I'd be like, why is he laughing?
Right.
And why is he saying everything's going to be okay?
Right.
It's not. I have, and he knew. He just said,
there's
go
some
to
serious
meetings.
stuff going on here.
Work the steps. You're going to get through this. And I couldn't see that. How?
So tell me about Working Steps. What was that like?
Yeah. So I jumped in, got a sponsor. I went through about my first sponsor faded out. No, my first sponsor moved to California.
Mm-hmm.
My next guy, I worked steps with him. Then he kind of faded into. Then my third guy, that's the guy I did my fifth step with.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but I was always in it. I didn't jump right in and start doing a 4-step quick. I jumped in to doing like my first meeting on a Sunday night in Seattle was Queen Anne Study,
Mm-hmm.
and they had a business meeting, and they said we need somebody to do cleanup.
That's right.
And I raised my hand. I'll do it, and I did it. Yeah, and I did it for a year and a half. But that service work kept me coming back to that every time.
You've been raising your hand ever since.
Ever since,
Okay.
all the way come full circle
You know.
to now doing the night watch chair, which it's just so I have to be in it. My typical MO is to not fully commit to anything and kind of be on the outskirts, just because I don't want to.
You gotta give yourself a loophole.
Right. I need an out.
Yes.
Which AA thankfully has taught me, like I can make a commitment, I can be accountable, and I can show up. And that's so. I think that's huge. I need that. I don't need that. I don't need to lie to myself and tell me that I don't need to be involved. I find the similarities. I commit. I'm in. It's huge, and I try to tell that to newcomers. It's like be a part of, but it's so easier said than done. I think on a lot of it's like newcomers are like, what is this? What are we doing? I'm grateful that when I came in, I was beat up enough where I was like, I was just done with the debate club, and I was like, okay, yes, I'll take these suggestions and I'll roll with it. That's
yeah.
But then again, I always say too, it's like I stopped in my late 30s. I blew by a lot of stuff, a lot of chances to stop. So I understand when people are, kind of like, I don't know. I believe everyone's on their own path, and when they're ready to surrender, or their heart's ready to be like, okay, let's do this. That's when they'll do it. But I can't talk anybody into doing it.
Mm-hmm.
It's which is tough because you want to tell people it's.
Yeah, you can't give people the
You can't.
No.
I love suggestions. If someone tells me what to do, I want to tell them to F off. I suggest you do this because it worked. Okay, I'll try it.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me about your relationship with your son now.
I think we were talking about that before the podcast. So I got sober. My son was born in February 2007. And I was not done drinking and drugging yet. By the time I got sober in January of 2008, he turned 1 in February 2008. And then it's been an ongoing. His mom and I, we were toxic, but out of that came a really cool. It's my son. But so it's been a journey because I thought I get sober, I get everything back. Of course, I get sober, I get the girl back, I get my son. That's how it works, right? But obviously, it's not. And so I had to fight for every bit of time with my son. So when he was 2, she moved back to where she grew up over in Paulsbo. So there was a long distance thing there, but I made every effort. I was over there all the time. I was involved in his school. I was involved in his life. I mean, showing up no matter what. And then when he was 3, so in 2010, she married a guy and moved to Louisiana. So I freaked out. I remember hearing that news from her. My first call though was to my sponsor. I mean, I was freaking out, but I think he just probably heard me out, but I think maybe his message is more like, well, let's just see what happens. We don't know, and so, and all through this stuff, I have attorneys and you have to do a parent plan and you adjust it. So I think in the course of his life, we've done about 4 or 5 parent plans. Crazy. But so he moved to Louisiana. So I'm thinking that's the end of the world. But it was going to be 3 years down there. It ended up being 3 months. He was back. I mean, literally moved in May of 2010. He was back summer 2010 and never went back. And so that was a lesson for me. And when they left, I could have done whatever. She was gone. There was no, I'm picking him up. Gosh, Rob looks drunk. I mean, I could have gotten drunk, high, whatever. There was nobody to hold me accountable because my son was out of the state and his mom was out of the state. So that was my first, I think that was when I was like, gosh, this program's working because I got through it. And I'm like, oh, all those things that used to baffle us or whatever, all of a sudden you get through stuff and you're like, wait a minute, that didn't send me sideways. So that was a huge lesson that also nothing's forever. I thought this is the end of the world. He's leaving the state. What will I do? He's 3. But it's just like, I just stayed the course, did what I could do. I went down and visited him for Father's Day 2010. Had a great time. But like I say, I had him up here for summer for like a few weeks, and then he just never went back. And then dealing with him in Paulsbo in kindergarten through 6th grade, working and just being as involved as I could. Never, and just, just in showing up for him. Now, his mom, who got me into treatment, I can't say she drinks still. I don't think she does the drugs anymore, but like she drinks. But I remember when he was, and I would have him for like every other weekend, and then I would sometimes he'd come to my home group, Queen Anne Study, and he loved it because he'd go to the kitchen and there was cookies. I remember one time he was probably 5 or 6, but he said, "Dad, you don't drink, do you?" And he'd never heard me. He's just an observation kind of thing. I never talked to him about, hey, I don't drink. I just kind of, these are the meetings I go to. And I always call them secret meetings. Kind of sounded cool. Secret meetings. And yeah, there's cookies there. And he also loved the fact that you got coins. He learned the Roman numerals from the coins I was getting. It's kind of cool.
Yeah.
But that said, he just said, "You don't drink, do you?" And I was like, "Well, not today." Because he's heard me enough times say to people, it was kind of cool. I thought about it, like, I don't tell people I don't drink. When people offer me drinks, my thing is, hey, I'm good. Water's fine. I never, unless I go down that path and like, well, my story is, but I just tell people, I've never said, no, I don't drink. I say, no, I'm good. And no one's really pushed back on that. So he heard me enough times, hey, Rob, could I get you a beer? No, I'm good. Here enough times to go, Dad, you don't drink, do you? Kind of cool. So just kids observe. So then we fast forward 2019. He's finishing 6th grade. His mom says, "I'm moving to Texas." Now, I had a different experience than what I did in 2010 when she said, I'm moving to Louisiana. I was with a sober guy at the time. We were hanging out at Ladro up on Queen Anne. And I said, "Dude, she just called and said she's moving to." I'm like, so didn't freak out as much because I knew I knew things would be okay. Maybe not how I want them, but they'd be okay. Did the whole family court thing. I thought that he should stay with me, let her go feel out in Texas. Judge said I couldn't keep him here, kind of thing, and that was her, gosh, judge says that's it. And then next week he was moving to Texas. So long story. Literally 3 years in Texas. I was down there a lot. I had some flexibility in my work and I was unemployed for a year and I was down there a lot. And then earlier this year, and when he was wrapping up middle school, he told us, he's like, "I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go live with Dad." She was like, over my dead body. But that was February of this year. I'd started looking at schools up here and making that kind of going down that path. And then he finished school in May. He came up here early June and he hasn't gone back. He started high school earlier this month. She finally, later this spring, early summer said, I respect your decision, Jackson. So that's his name. And you can go live with your dad. So I say all that because I don't know what God's plan is for me, but I do know that if I drink and drug, all that's out the door. So I just stay the course.
Yeah.
And I know that God has a plan. I'm a huge fan of step 3. I'm a huge fan of all the steps, but that whole turn my will and my life over, I have to do that every morning. I have to remind myself. I have to do that every phone call with people. Like when the mother of my child, when she calls, I have to say that will be done a couple of times. Take a deep breath, answer the phone, as opposed to Rob's will, which got me into a lot of trouble. So that's that whole thing. It's just been just that path. The only thing that's been consistent is I haven't picked up a drink or a drug, and I have not strayed far from AA. My meetings are always on, or I'm always doing step work or service work in some capacity. Not all 3 at once all the time, but there's always some component of it. And I think it works.
Yeah. I've always heard that you got to get in the middle, right?
Oh,
so that when the hard times comes, you don't fall off the edge.
Right? I heard too many people say, I just started straying away, and then the next thing I know, I didn't have that tight connection to AA, and I had no defense against that that first drink.
Right.
And I learn, I live vicariously through people's stories about relapse, and I hold no judgment to people that relapse. Everyone's got their story, but I listen to those stories, and it's I live, like I said, I live vicariously through them, and
Sure.
I've never heard one person say I relapsed and everything was great.
Right.
So I have a healthy. I've worked on a lot of fears, and I have a healthy fear of going back. I don't want to go back to that. So.
Absolutely. So tell me just a little bit in the last few minutes here about so we operate a 24-hour phone line, so that it's important that whenever somebody calls Seattle AA, that there's a sober alcoholic on the other end of the line.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the main things that
Yeah.
most intergroups and Seattle intergroup do. And so you just recently, within the last few months, became Night Watch chair. Night Watch is what we call the organization of the volunteers that answers the phones when the office is closed, right?
Yeah.
So tell me about how that's been going.
Oh,
I know it's,
my gosh.
I got to tell you, Rob, that I think that, I love all the people who are, the service committees and everything that they do to reach out to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. But it's the Night Watch chair, especially, I think is one of the more intense service positions here in a group. And so you've done a smashing job.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, a few months in, you've been. It takes a team. You've been so much of a help, and obviously Mike B, who handed it over to me. So my first experience, early 2020. Yeah. So my sponsor, Joe P, moved back to North Carolina, but he's like, hey, you need to pick up my shift of Night Watch. I didn't know what it was.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what? Sounds cool. Night Watch sounds cool. Very Game of Thrones-ish.
Right.
But I didn't know what it was. But Mike B called me to vet me, I think, and explain what Night Watch was. Sure. And I started taking phone calls, like I think almost pre-pandemic.
Early 2020. Is that like right when COVID hit?
I think right when COVID hit, which is a perfect time to take calls because meetings closed down. Yeah. I remember taking a lot of calls in 2020. I had the fourth Monday of the month, 2 a.m. to 6 a.m. shift. Now, my initial reaction when people ask about service is to say no, because I have all these things in my mind, like, no, what do you mean 2 a.m.? Why would I want it? It's 4 hours a month. It's nothing.
Right.
It's an amazing thing. Talking to a suffering alcoholic. No one's calling at 2 a.m. because they're on a winning streak and things are going great. Yeah. Just not. But you're right. I pick up the phone when someone calls, and for them to hear a live voice when they're struggling and they just want to vent. Most times they just want to vent. But I can share my experience if they ask me, how did you do it? And I always go back to I'm a huge proponent of AA and doing the steps. Mm-hmm. But taking those phone calls. So I knew Mike B was doing that. And then earlier this year, I think Mike B is like, I think I'm thinking about handing it over in the spirit of rotation with service. He'd been doing it for a few years. And I was like, what do you, Night Watch chair? That's a lot. What is it? I knew I'd get those emails every month from Mike. Here's the calendar for the month. Here's, and if left by my devices, I'll just show up and partake and not give,
Mm-hmm.
But what does it take to get that stuff done on the back end? But so that's been eye-opening the past few months, but we got a bunch of people here volunteering and helping out, and new people coming on, and then people rotating out in the spirit of kind of rotation. So putting the calendar together is huge. Vetting new volunteers, which we can direct through the intergroup website to go into service, and they go into Night Watch, and they can fill out a volunteer form, and then I reach out to them and then vet them and see if they're up for it. Mm-hmm. It's not for everybody. It's really not. You have to kind of be open to being uncomfortable and being maybe awoken in the middle of the night. Sure. It's not, it's not for everybody. There's, right. So I'm grateful to the people that are doing it and the new people that are coming on. It's great.
Absolutely. I remember, I've answered phones for intergroup. Well, I remember, gosh, I was pregnant with my first child when I took my first phone shift. So that was 30 years ago. But it's scary. It's kind of scary to make yourself like, I'm the only person answering phones for Seattle AA right now, right?
Yeah.
And what if I screw things up? What right? But you have a lot of support, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you have supporting documents you can look at. You have, you know, I mean, and you realize, well, you don't have to have all the answers, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, which is cool. But I'm not sure where I was going with that, but it's been, how many volunteers do you think is like somewhere upwards of 100
Right,
volunteers,
100
right?
volunteers. You got to figure 3
Every,
shifts a night. So
yeah,
we cover the phones 10 o'clock at night till
Yeah.
10 in the morning.
yeah,
3 4-hour shifts
right,
on a 30, 31 month
right.
day month. It's like there's people waiting, volunteering and take over, and it's hundreds of volunteers.
That's really great. One of the greatest parts about working here that where I see God working the most is when somebody calls in and they want someone to call them back. So we start scouring the 12-step list, which can be maddening because it's like no one answers, no can't, you know,
Yeah.
can't do it, and disconnected, you know, go down. But invariably, the person that we get a hold of to call that person back, you get chills because you know that this is exactly the right person that's
Right?
supposed to make this call.
Yeah.
It's kind of amazing. I mean, it's not kind of amazing.
It's
totally
extremely amazing.
Yeah, it's just like it's otherworldly.
Yeah.
And you know, it brings chills and
That's how it all
tears, and
works.
It is
That's
exactly how it works.
Yeah.
We're just tapping into this, you know, spiritual realm of existence.
Right.
And yeah.
And I find that spirituality comes through the act of doing. Like,
Yeah.
you know, it's faith without works is dead. I need to do the works. And then typically through that, I have these spiritual experiences. Like you say, answering a phone call at 2, 3 in the morning, talking to somebody who's suffering, tell them it's going to be okay.
Mhm.
Like that guy told me, it's going to be okay, Rob. I'm like, no, it's not. What do you mean it's not? But it's going to be okay. We'll get you to a meeting tomorrow. You know, you don't have to drink again. Like that. It's like, everything's going to be fine.
Mhm.
What do you mean? It's just, you know, yeah. So
That's super great.
yeah.
Well, it's been 32 minutes.
Wow,
Isn't
that went
amazing?
fast.
It does go by
Yeah.
fast. I really appreciate you coming in.
No, thanks,
today.
Lara. I appreciate you.
And thanks
Yeah.
for all your service to Seattle.
Of course.